I stood outside my sister's graduation while a security guard blocked the gate. He said it was a private event and my name wasn't allowed inside. I smiled, thinking it had to be a mistake. Then my sister walked over in her gown, glanced at me, and said, "This is no place for losers." My parents were right behind her, laughing like it was harmless. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I went home quietly. What none of them knew was this wasn't humiliation. It was a decision. Because that same night, I changed one sentence, and her entire future started to unravel after that. My name is Evelyn. I'm in my mid-30s, and on paper, my life looks fine. I work an administrative job that pays the bills. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in West Haven. It's quiet, clean, predictable. The kind of place you end up with when you've spent most of your life making sure other people are okay before checking on yourself. Growing up, I was the older sister, the easy one, the one who didn't cause problems. Before Jessica was born, my parents used to say I was mature for my age. After she arrived, that same word started meaning something else. It meant I should understand. I should wait. I should give in. Jessica needed more attention. Jessica was sensitive. Jessica had potential. That pattern never really changed. When Jessica went to college, my parents framed it as a family effort. They didn't ask directly. They never do. It was more like, "She's so lucky to have a sister like you," or "You're better with money anyway." So I helped. I covered her rent. I took care of some bills. Not exact numbers, just whatever kept her afloat. I told myself it was temporary, that it meant something. Jessica never thanked me. Not directly. She didn't have to. My parents praised her for being independent while quietly sending me reminders when payments were due. I learned to separate my feelings from my actions. That's what responsible adults do, right? The only people who ever noticed were my grandparents. They'd call to check in, ask how work was going, tell me they were proud of me. Small things, but they mattered. They made me feel visible in a family where being useful was often mistaken for being loved. When Jessica's graduation came up, no one formally invited me. There was no message asking if I could make it. I found out through the family chat photos of decorations and excited comments flying by like I was already supposed to be there. I assumed it was implied. Of course I'd come. I was her sister. I picked out a simple outfit. Nothing flashy. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to show up. I didn't know that showing up was the one thing they never planned for. The house was easy to find. Cars lined the street, music drifting from the backyard, balloons tied to the fence like they were announcing something important to the entire neighborhood. I parked a block away and walked the rest, smoothing my shirt, reminding myself to smile. This was Jessica's day. I wasn't there to take up space. I just wanted to be present. At the gate, a security guard stepped in front of me with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He asked for my name, then glanced at a clipboard. His finger slid down the list once, then again. He shook his head. "Private event," he said. "You're not on the list." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it felt unreal. "I'm her sister," I said, nodding toward the house. "There's been a mistake." He didn't argue. He just tilted his head and called someone over his radio. I waited. The music kept playing. People walked past me with wrapped gifts and drinks, barely noticing I was there. A few minutes later, Jessica appeared at the gate. Cap off, gown open, hair perfectly styled like she was about to step onto a stage not greet family. For half a second, I felt relief. She'd fix it. Of course she would. She looked at me then at the guard, and her expression didn't change. No surprise, no confusion, just impatience. "What's going on?" she asked, already annoyed. "He said my name again." That's when she laughed. "This is no place for losers," she said loud enough for the people behind her to hear. I waited for her to smile after, to show it was a joke. She didn't. Behind her, my parents stood frozen for a beat. Then my mom let out a small laugh like she didn't want to make a scene. My dad smiled awkward and quick the way he always does when things get uncomfortable. No one said my name. No one stepped forward. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, heavier. "You really came," my dad said, like I'd shown up uninvited to a stranger's wedding. "We thought you understood." Understood what? That I wasn't welcome, that I was only useful from a distance, that my role was to support, not participate. I looked at Jessica again. She was already turning back toward the house conversation over, as if I were an interruption she'd handled efficiently. I could have said everything then, about the rent, the bills, the years of showing up quietly. But I didn't. I nodded once, said nothing, and walked away. As I reached my car, the laughter from the party floated down the street. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, heart steady in a way that scared me, because in that silence I finally understood something. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a boundary they'd drawn a long time ago. I didn't drive straight home. I sat in the car for a few minutes, engine off, listening to the music from the party fade as someone turned the volume down. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. That was the strange part. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt clear, like something heavy had finally settled instead of floating around inside me. When I got back to my apartment in West Haven, everything looked exactly the same. The couch with the cushion I kept flipping to hide the tear, the space heater in the corner, the stack of unopened mail on the counter. It was quiet in a way the party never would have been. No applause, no laughter, just me. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the clothes I'd picked so carefully. That's when it hit me, not the insult, not my parents' laughter, but the realization that none of it was new. Today hadn't changed anything. It had just made it impossible to pretend anymore. I thought about the payments I'd set up months ago, the reminders that popped up on my phone like clockwork. Rent, utilities, small things that added up to a life I wasn't living. I thought about how no one had ever asked if I was okay with it. They'd just assumed I would be. My phone buzzed. A message from the family chat, photos from the party, Jessica holding a cake, my parents smiling, comments flying back and forth like I wasn't sitting alone in a quiet apartment miles away. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new message. Not long, not emotional, just one sentence. Clear, calm. I read it 3 times before sending it, making sure there was nothing in it that sounded like anger or guilt or explanation. I didn't owe her any of that. When I hit send, I didn't feel powerful. I felt honest. That's when my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to hear my own thoughts for once, without someone else talking over them. I stood up and walked to the window. The street below was empty, a couple walking their dog, a car passing by. Normal life continuing like nothing had happened. For the first time, I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. If I stop paying, if I stop fixing, if I stop being convenient, who am I to them? Then I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew I was about to find out. Jessica showed up the next morning. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. The knock wasn't firm. It was rushed. Uneven. Like someone who didn't know whether they were about to beg or yell. I looked down at myself, sweatpants and old sweater coffee gone cold in my hand, and for a split second I wondered if she'd notice how small my place really was. How different it looked from the life she thought I lived. When I opened the door, she was standing there in yesterday's dress. The fabric was wrinkled. There was a faint smear near the hem like she'd brushed against frosting or dirt and never bothered to clean it. Her eyes were puffy, not dramatic, just tired, scared. "Can we talk?" she asked. She didn't wait for an answer. She stepped inside like she'd done it 100 times before and dropped onto the couch, crossing her arms, then uncrossing them like she couldn't get comfortable. "I can't afford this," she said immediately. "You can't just do this out of nowhere." I leaned against the counter and watched her talk, the way her voice cracked at the word afford, the way she kept glancing around my apartment, finally seeing things she'd never bothered to notice before. The worn couch, the heater I moved from room to room in the winter, the fact that nothing here suggested extra money. "You could have talked to me," she said. "You could have told me you were upset." "I did," I said calmly. "Yesterday." She scoffed. "That wasn't serious. You always get sensitive." There it was. The reflex. Dismiss, minimize, move on. "You called me a loser," I said. "In front of everyone." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, It was a joke. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it. An unknown number. I ignored it. A joke, I repeated. That was funny to you. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned back and sighed like she was the one exhausted by all of this. You didn't help me because you're generous, she said. You helped because you like having control. You always make everything about you. I didn't interrupt her. I let her finish. I'd spent my whole life listening. I wasn't about to stop now. That's why I said what I said, she continued. You want credit. You want everyone to clap for you. I took a breath. Then you won't mind paying for yourself. She froze. My phone buzzed again. Same number. Then a voicemail notification popped up. I pressed play and set the phone down between us. It was my grandmother. Her voice was soft, steady. She said she'd heard what happened, that they hadn't been invited either, that my sister's words were cruel, that my parents' silence was worse. She said she was proud of me, that she and Grandpa would stop by later with coffee if that was okay. Jessica's face drained of color. They weren't invited, I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. Mom said, She said Grandpa always complains, that he'd ruin the mood. He paid for Dad's first car, I said, and Mom's medical bills. Jessica didn't argue. She didn't need to. The truth was already sitting between us. Another knock came at the door an hour later. My grandparents' car was parked outside, familiar and unassuming. Jessica stood up immediately. I should go, she muttered. I have to study. She slipped out without looking at them. My grandparents stayed for 2 hours. We didn't talk about the party much. We talked about work, about how fast time moves when you're not paying attention, about ordinary things that suddenly felt rare. Before they left, Grandpa squeezed my shoulder. You don't owe anyone your silence, he said. After they were gone, the apartment felt different. Not heavier, quieter in a way that felt earned. I sat on my bed phone in my hand and finally checked my messages. That's when Megan's name popped up. She came by that afternoon, awkward and apologetic, holding a container she clearly didn't know what to do with. She sat on the edge of the chair and took a deep breath. I didn't know they wouldn't let you in, she said. And when Jessica said that thing, I laughed. Not because it was true, because I didn't know how not to. I nodded. I know. Then she pulled out her phone. There's something you need to see. It was a group chat, Jessica and her friends. Messages scrolling back months, jokes about how I paid her bills, how I'd always show up anyway, how I was obsessed with being included. One message stood out, followed by laughing emojis. He pays my rent and still gets treated like garbage. Loser. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel angry. I felt confirmed. Can you show this to Mom? Megan asked quietly. I nodded once. That evening, I opened the family chat and dropped the screenshot in. No explanation, no caption. Just proof. The chat went silent. Minutes passed. Then Aunt Linda left the group. Just gone. I didn't wait for the rest. I drove to my parents' house. My mom opened the door looking shaken. My dad sat on the couch, hands clasped like he'd been expecting a lecture. Jessica wasn't there. I didn't sit down. I told them everything. About the payments, about being invisible, about standing outside a gate while they laughed. I told them I was done fixing things they broke and pretending that love meant compliance. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm choosing myself. My dad looked at the floor. My mom opened her mouth, then closed it. I left before they could explain. That night I posted the truth online. Not names, just facts. I wrote until there was nothing left to hold in. And for the first time, I slept without feeling like I was waiting for permission. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came quietly. The family chat stayed silent. No apologies, no explanations, just an emptiness where noise used to be. I didn't chase it. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for filling the gap. I stopped the payments. All of them. Rent, bills, anything tied to Jessica's life that wasn't mine to carry. Nothing dramatic happened. No police. No screaming matches. Just consequences settling into place. My grandparents came by a few days later. We sat at my small kitchen table with coffee that was too strong and pastries that left crumbs everywhere. Grandma reached for my hand and said, "You did the right thing." Grandpa nodded. That was enough. Ryan ran into me at a grocery store downtown. He looked uncomfortable, like he'd rehearsed what he wanted to say and still got it wrong. He admitted he'd laughed that day, said he shouldn't have. He handed me some cash and told me to have lunch on him. It wasn't about the money. It was about being seen. I thanked him. That night, I met Leo for dinner at a little place in the city. We talked about old movies, bad jobs, how strange it feels to start over in your 30s. I laughed without checking myself, without shrinking. When I went home, my apartment felt different. Still small, still imperfect. But it was mine. And for the first time, that felt like more than enough. I didn't lose my family. I stopped paying the price to belong to people who never chose me. Walking away wasn't easy, but staying invisible was harder. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: love doesn't demand silence, and family isn't supposed to cost you your dignity. If you've ever been treated like you only mattered when you were useful, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if this hit close to home, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.